You aren't healthy one day and sick the next. Your lifestyle leads to sickness. Dr. Evelyn Higgins joins us for a fun discussion about mental health. She says 75% of diseases are lifestyle diseases. She learned this while trying to manage her way through 2 strokes. She touches on the spiritual element that is missing in a biopsychosocial, genetic snips, methylation, and goes deep on her trek along the Camino de Santiago in Spain. She also talks about how we all play the genetic hands we are dealt in life differently, and how we shouldn't try to protect our children from having a human experience. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery Podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery Podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Kurt and I have the privilege of talking with Dr. Evelyn Higgins today. We've had a fun pre-recording talking with Evelyn and all of her excitement and the things that she's done. She is the CEO of Pillar Health Systems, and she is a consultant. She's authored several books, including her latest, The Dr. Higgins Guide to Health and Wellness, along with The Mystery of Happiness, a step-by-step journal of gratitude. Her upcoming book, 3 Meetings, was the result of a 534-mile trek from southern France through the Pyrenees Mountains and across the entire country of Spain. Okay, I want to hear about that. She was selected as a community hero, bestowing upon her the privilege of being an Olympic torchbearer. Evelyn is also broadcasted on both public and commercial radio and is a host of the Dr. Evelyn Higgins Show, which is a nationally syndicated radio program. Evelyn is recognized internationally as an expert in addiction, functional medicine, health and wellness. She looks at health as more than simply the absence of disease by investigating the physical, emotional, intellectual, as well as the spiritual elements of wholeness, which I love that approach. Evelyn, thank you so much for being with us today.
Shelley, my pleasure. Kurt, my pleasure. It's an honor to be on your podcast. It's a great podcast.
Oh, thank you. We were having a lot of fun. I will say we started this because, the work that we do advocating for clients is kind of in the background. People don't see what we do. They don't hear what we do. And we're not out there, feeling like we're really helping in a more of an open way. And so the podcast was really a fun way for us to get on, connect with really interesting and amazing people that are out there, trying to do their best to help people recovery and enjoy wellness and health. So I appreciate you saying that.
Oh, absolutely. But, I think you're being a little bit tough on yourself because the business that you guys are in, without you doing it well, people don't get the help that they need. So it is a very important piece of the whole puzzle.
Well, it's vital, and it's taxing, right? Where everybody's working their hearts out and want to make sure we do the best because there's a person behind everything that we do, and we try and remember that. It's like, is this my sister? Is this my brother? Right. Who is this person? Because it's somebody, and we got to do our best. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Higgins, you've been in this, this industry and a lot of, health and wellness spaces. Maybe start kind of more to the beginning of how you ended up here, how you ended up on this journey and doing this kind of work.
Okay, well, with the addictions part, didn't start out there, which is pretty much everybody's story, right? It's usually not, the first grade, what do you want to be when you grow up, on that really big paper that you have to write really big on. It's like, I want to help people with addictions. You don't even know what that is at that age, right? But as you go through life, you see the human experience and what all that brings. You realize that this is a real part of life. And for me, I have a bunch of different things that I've done along the way, but my first degree was as a chiropractor. And I practiced in a really rural area of Northwest Georgia in the mountains where there were absolutely no resources. And I have people come in and I'm like, you know what, I can adjust you all day long, but until we deal with all of these other parts of you, you're not going to get where you need to get. So I had initially done a CAP program, a certified addiction professional, just to have that in my toolbox. Back up a little bit, married my childhood friend who, as you get into the adult world, never realized had a problem with alcohol. And once we had a child, it became very apparent that this was a real situation. So doing that CAP program was also part of, I have a child that's going to have part of this in her makeup. How am I going to do that? There's the parent part of me. What's my responsibility? Started practicing, adding that to my practice, which started out as an intellectual, I need this tool in my toolbox, became personal. Fast forward, we're divorced. Fast forward from that, he dies in his 40s. Wow. Lifestyle. 70 to 85% of the diseases that we are plagued with are lifestyle diseases. Yet we talk about everything else, but how are you living your life every day? I say to people, you're not healthy one day and sick the next. It's all the living that you do in between that brings you to either end of that segment. So did that. Now I'm doing that with my patients in rural Georgia. I'm no longer practicing there. Keep being drawn to addictions as the older I get, and I am seeing my friends and I'm seeing my family, and I'm like, guys, yeah, we grew up where all this was normal, but it's not normal. This is not a normal way to live. When you don't want to feel every day of your life, it means there's something wrong with your life. And the hard work of life comes, as you guys know, when you say, all right, let's start to dissect and be honest. What I call the honesty inventory, right? Really, where are you at? You can BS me all day you want. You can say, nah, that's not true. This is true. You're dealing with you. And when you're trying to check out of life every single day, there's a problem, right? So I went on, I got a diplomate in addictions, wound up, fast forward now, 15 years ago, I started practicing the way I currently do, doing a lot of work with neurotransmitters, hormones, that kind of stuff. And that was because I'm 61 now. At 46, I had 2 TIAs, transient ischemic attacks or mini strokes. Kind of looked the same way as I do now. So it wasn't like, wow, you look like the picture of unhealthiness. I looked the same, but it was all the stress that was inside of me and I wasn't letting go of. I didn't have that outlet. So I became my first patient in that way after I had the stroke. It wasn't the first one I went to the hospital for because I didn't have time. I mean, that's how I was living my life at that time. I don't have time for this. I dropped my daughter off at school and, I drop her off there and I'm in the car and I have to go for, start 9 o'clock patients. And I already know I'm going to be late because of the traffic that I'm dealing with in Atlanta. But I started out my day at 5:30, so I shouldn't be late. And it was about 30 to 40 minutes that I had to sit in the car and wait until my faculties came back to where I could drive to the office to start my day, making believe nothing had happened. 10 days later, I had a much more severe reaction to where it went on for a few hours. And my office manager said to me, Doc, you're having a stroke. And my reply was, I know. Because I'm still in control here. Yeah, I know. So she said, I'm going to call an ambulance. And I said, no, just drive me. still thinking about, we don't need that negative PR coming into the office with an ambulance. It's like, what are you doing? But this is all the stuff we do in our heads, and when you get to the point where you can admit that and laugh about it, you're in a good place, right? So her husband comes in, who is an EMT, and he's like, Doc, you having a stroke? No, blah, blah, blah. By the time we got to the hospital, 20 minutes later, I couldn't speak, I couldn't walk, I went in a wheelchair. My daughter's husband, already deceased. I'm like, the most important thing in the world to me was my daughter, and I'm going to leave her without any parents because I'm going to work myself to death because I just got to go. Doesn't make sense. 3-4 hours later, a bunch of diagnostic workups, all that kind of thing. Said, so you had a TIA, that means I'm like, yep. So at that point, I fess up to, I had one 10 days before. It wasn't as severe, and he's like, your chances of having a full-blown stroke within the next 90 days have increased greatly. You need to do something. So I'm like, he says, you need to take a baby aspirin a day, and you need to reduce your stress. So at this point, I had half a funny bone back, and I said, Doc, give me a minute. I need to write down reduce stress, like as if it's that easy for any of us, right? But that's where the work begins. So I took 3 weeks off of work, which I'd never done before, and because I couldn't work, really. I mean, I didn't have the physical ability to do it. I was speaking again, but I didn't have the physical ability. And once I felt a little bit better, I started doing research. I'm like, I need more answers than take a baby aspirin a day. How did this happen? What was going on physiologically in my body? We know stress, but how is that stress affecting my physiology? That being said, a lot of research, learned about neurotransmitters, brain chemicals, how all those interact with everything, and started to practice the way I do. I went to my first seminar taught by the guys at the lab, and I had already done my own labs, and I was the poster girl for a stroke. So after that, I'm like, if we have this information, why are we not sharing it with people? The guys who are brilliant enough to figure this out, you don't need to just do this and pat yourself on the back. You need to disseminate that information so stuff like this doesn't happen to other people. So that was kind of my segue. Got more and more into the addictions because I'm like, okay, how does this actually happen? What's going on in somebody's physiology? Because you guys are in the addictions world, and everybody that's listening is, that it's multi-layered. That it's BioPsychoSocial or body, mind, spirit, however you want to describe it. It's all of those things. But how do we get there? What's happening in your physiology? So the last thing that we created is the genetic snips to look at somebody's profile that is an addict. What's different in your genes? Where do we have genetic weaknesses? Why does somebody become a diabetic? Lifestyle. But what's the underlying part in there of why their lifestyle, which is the same as the other guy, created diabetes in them and not the other guy, right? So that's the work that we do now. It's kind of genetics with scientific validation. And being in the addictions field, how difficult it is. It's a daily process. But if we can uncover, you are dealt your DNA when you're born. Here's your cards, go play them, right? It's how we live that plays out our cards. So there's now, without getting too sciencey, we now have all the research that proves epigenetics, meaning that we can upregulate or downregulate our genetics. So when you have two people with the same exact genetic background, one becomes an addict, one doesn't, they played their cards differently. So perfect world, going to prevention, if we did this on everybody and said, you can't play. I mean, I've had young patients that I've said, get back their results. I'm like, here's the deal. I'm going to tell you straight up. And the mom's in the background going like this. Yes, keep talking. I go, your buddies are going to do stuff. Every kid growing up does stuff. You can't do the same thing and get away with it. You hear what I'm saying? The kid's like, yeah. But that's kind of Cliff Notes version. I know that's a lot, and I took you to a lot of different places, but that's how I wound up doing the work that I do now. And it's fascinating.
Oh, it's incredibly fascinating. And the epigenetics and the predispositions and And the fact that we have some capacity to regulate that, to change that, and to impact that. And you talked about, all this scientific evidence and information that we have, and disseminating that information. But here you are, a doctor, and you kind of knew already, and it still didn't change. Your high stress and your push and your I have to, which is why I love hearing you talk about the mind, the body, the spirit. Those things are all connected, and the smartest person in the world can do the dumbest things, right? And it's not what we're trying to do, but we're trying to survive. And so I'm curious how you balance those pieces, and when you work with people, how do you get them to understand that what they're doing isn't healthy? Because I'm sure that's not. I mean, maybe you knew I'm not being healthy, but you felt driven. I have to do this, right? So many people feel like I have to do this or I'm going to die. People are going to get hurt or whatever, I'm going to be destitute. Whatever those drivers are, how do you help them get past that?
Well, I talk about all of what I call the 4 pillars of health. We have our physical health, our emotional health, our intellectual health, and our spiritual health. And then I'll say, actually the easiest is your physical health, because I can tell you what to do. And you can either decide to take that advice or not. But that actually has, like when I work up somebody's profile, I'm looking at biochemical pathways. And I'm saying, here's what we need to do for you to get you to this place, right? So that's the physical part. And of course, all the regular, the obvious, you have to sleep 8 to 9 plus hours a day, depending on who you are. You have to move your joints. We have joints because we were meant to move them, all the obvious stuff. But the physical health is actually the easiest, because the emotional then builds off of the physical. Let's talk about a dual diagnosis patient, right? If their physiology isn't in place, I am a proponent of prayer. I meditate. I do all those things. But without our physiology in place right away, you're not going to yoga it away. You're not going to meditate away. That's a tool that we need to use every day. But we have to optimizing us, right? So then the come. Then the intellectual part of like, what are you adding into your life? What books do you read that make you a better you? What music do you listen to that actually makes your mind create and motivates you? Or is everything you're allowing yourself to say, watch on TV, make you feel like life is doom and gloom and should we even be here, right? So that's a part that's within our control. And then the last part is spirituality. Some people never even get it before they leave Earth. It's like, because they all build on top of each other. But that's the aha moment when you see how all this works together. I mean, the most beautiful machine ever created is us, right? Yet if Apple puts out a new device, there's lines around the block to go get that new thing that I have to have. When this is the most powerful, beautiful machine, and we all, myself included, start with the story that I told you initially. We all use and abuse ourselves every day, right? Yet somehow it still works. That's the beauty of the body. But when we abuse it to a point where we've now created disease, we have a problem. So perfect world, we get people to understand that along the way. And this is exactly how I talk to my patients. I'm like, man, you have a gift. And at the end of this, my job is to make you realize that you have a gift. It's up to you how you want to play it out.
I love that so much. I love that approach. I love that you've got that balance, but it's all backed by scientists, by scientific information and that evidence-based, it's what we know. And we know so much more now with that, being able to do functional MRIs and see how people are responding, being able to do these genetic tests and say, look, this medication is probably going to work for you better than another, right? And to try and eliminate that what I'll say is awful transition of which medication is going to work for you and actually get you to the best place. That's so painful. And how many people go, yeah, I'm out, I'm done, I can't do this anymore.
Exactly. Great point, Shelley. Pharmacogenomic testing. Why guess at something when we have the science to stop the guessing part? Right? We need to employ all of these aspects of what we've learned from research. I mean, NIH spends an incredible, I used to know the facts, I don't know them anymore, how much money is put into research, yet it stops there. Put it out into the world and let people be bettered by having that information and that research put into life. And that's what all these things are doing. Talk about the functional MRI, the genetics, the single nucleotide polymorphisms. It's like you have these genes. One comes from mom, one comes from dad. We see what's heterozygous and homozygous. Do you have a little bit of a problem with this one, or you have 100% problem with this one? We can tell that. So then at the end of it, we all still have free will, right? You get to say, I'm going to take this information and use it to my best ability, or I'm going to pass. That's your choice. That's your choice. And that's the beauty of free will.
It is, and you can choose not and take the consequences, and still the body is so resilient. Most of the time you can come back and bring yourself back to a degree of health, even as much as we abuse it, right?
Right.
And it is incredible. I don't know.
You get away with it for a while, and then one day doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying about the brain and the mind and the body and the way it all functions together. It is so powerful. I don't know of anything that's more fascinating. I was sharing with somebody the other day, it's a little bit of a side note, but University of Utah was doing some studies on people with, back in the day, multiple personalities or dissociative disorder today, and how one of them needed insulin and the other personality didn't. One needed glasses and the other personality didn't, and it was like, how does the body do that? Like, and the personality, if they don't all agree and someone gives them medication, they'll reject the medication. They won't allow it to be effective in the body. And I'm like, what a powerful system that we have, that it can do that, right?
Right.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. Well, even that makes me think of like methylation. Some people have heard of this term now because it's a little bit more common. There's a lot of stuff out there on the web about methylation. But, so how come somebody says, well, I don't know, say they're older. Say I'm 50 years old. When I was 15, this never happened to me, because all of the things that have happened to you from 15 to 50 hadn't happened to you yet. So now there's a weakness, a genetic weakness, which was just brought out to light, and you can't metabolize and you can't break down anymore the way you did. Even talk about somebody who's older. It used to be, 2 drinks, that's nothing. You get older, 2 drinks is like, what, have you been doing this all day? Right? Because your liver can't let all of that toxin go through, because it's a toxin, right? So you can't methylate the way you did before. It's like a car. Does it run the same at 10,000 miles as it does at 100,000 miles? No.
No, it's not as tight. It's not as good. It's not, those joints, and it doesn't matter how good we are to our bodies, we still have the effect of age, right? And age it's just, that's the way we work, right? It's just a normal process of being a human being.
Yep. And we get to have, hopefully, the wisdom on the other side of that, which is our beautiful part of living through this process, right? And that's our reward for doing it. And you see life differently.
It's beautiful. I want to ask you a little bit about your book, The Mystery of Happiness, a step-by-step journey, a journal of gratitude. And I love gratitude. It's, as I've learned to practice gratitude over the years, I've watched it shift the way I think about the world. And I see so many people stuck in kind of victim mode that I would love to spend a little bit of time on what drove you to write that book, and what do you see the benefits? Like, what are the principles of it?
So really employing it in my own life on a daily basis was how I wound up writing that. And then I wanted to share it in a journal form with my patients. It was, we can all cry, this isn't fair, the victim stuff, we can all do that. But at the end of it, does it get us anywhere? No, right? So how are you going to get past that? And I learned that even the fake it till you make it, right? If I did this as a ritual, as a habit, every night before I went to bed, I noticed my life getting better and better and better. I'm like, man, this is really powerful stuff. It does work. And sometimes it's the most simple things that people want to blow off, right? Because that can't be right. Like, I had a patient, so she's like, I want to get the journal, blah, blah, blah. So she does. And she comes in the next day and she says to me, I read the whole thing. I'm like, I said, Mrs. So-and-so, it's not a reading book. It's a book. And I talked to her just like that, and she'd laugh. I say, you're only meant to do one exercise a day because it's about changing habits. It's about making this start to work differently. And like, yeah, I know. It's sometimes people want, like, I want a blood test. I'm like, okay, we can do the blood test. But I'm also listening to you. And I'm telling you, this is going to give us as much information and maybe even be more powerful than our blood test right now. So was that actually changed me in getting out of my woe is me stuff? Post the TIAs, blah, blah, blah. Financially, things had changed. Everything changed. It was like, all right, how are you going to move forward? You're going to sit here and wallow, or you're going to get on with life? And it was in doing that it changed my life. And I'm like, okay, guys, this is there's no copay, there's no deductible, there's no anything involved other than doing the work. And the work may only have to take you, because sometimes, you probably know, you have to take people by the hand and say, please just do it. I'll say to somebody, humor me. Look at me like I'm the world's biggest idiot. Humor me and just do it. And it's only going to take you 2 minutes. Don't put more than that into it. Just give me 2 minutes. And if you can't think of anything that's absolutely good in your life, did you get out of bed today? That's number one. Give me 4 more things. Is the sun shining or not? Is it raining? If it's raining, is it feeding the flowers? Okay. So I would start with somebody by just saying, 5 things a day, that at the end of your day, you're laying in bed, you keep this on your nightstand. Just write down 5 things. Just give me 5. And then what you start to see is you're looking for things that you can write in your journal list, right? So how are you viewing life differently now than you did before? Which is the whole lesson of this. There's good all around us, or there's bad all around us. Which one do you want to see?
I had someone that I was working with at one point, and they were really, really trying hard to do a gratitude journal, and they would write things in the gratitude journal, and they would really try and be diligent, but they could never connect with the feeling of gratitude. And I thought that was really interesting. Have you come across, that situation in your experience?
Oh, absolutely. And as you know, from the practitioner side of it, it can be rough, because we all feel everybody else's energy too. But yes, I have. And that's where I'll start explaining. We don't get from here to here without little incremental steps. I'm like, I like using baseball analogies. I'm like, every time you get up to bat, it's not a home run. Sometimes hitting a single is what we need to do. Sometimes, remember when you were a little kid and it was like the kid that could never get on base was everybody'd start from the sidelines yelling, get hit by the ball, because the kid was going to get on base, and then usually the person will laugh. I'll say, but that's life. Every time at bat, you're not hitting a home run. Let's look, in baseball, you make it to the Hall of Fame, you make it to Cooperstown. It's because you had a 300 plus batting average. That means every 1 in 3 times you got up, you got a hit. Usually that starts to resonate with people like, yeah, I'm like, give yourself a little bit more credit. That you're being so hard on yourself. And that's typically what I'll see in that person. They're so hard on themselves internally. They may not say that in words, but when you start to uncover, I'm like, if you talk to your best friend every day, how you talk to yourself, how long would they be your best friend? And they'll smile. They'll be like, yeah, not long. I'm like, exactly. Be kinder to yourself, self-care. So it's in steps, right?
Yeah, totally. It is. It's totally in steps, and sometimes it feels hopeless, but it does. It's incremental, and sometimes it's so organic from doing those simple activities, make it till you fake it, that you don't even realize you're changing.
Exactly. And then one day it's like, maybe it's a friend or a loved one or a coworker that says, what's different about you? What are you doing? And it's because you've been doing the little steps.
It's fantastic. I'm totally going to get your book and go through the gratitude, because I don't think, I love my practice of gratitude, but I want it to be better and bigger and, more abundant. And so I always love those pieces. I'm dying to talk to you about your book that's coming out. I think it's coming out, unless it's already, 3 meetings, and your 534-mile trek across French and the Pyrenees. Talk about that a little bit.
All right, so this sounds crazy. Have you ever read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?
Yes, I know the book very well, and I've read it, but I need to go back. It's on my reread list so that I can refresh my brain as to what it was.
So I think it's towards the end of the book, that trek is mentioned because it's a hike of better than 1,200-year history with all these incredible stories that have come out of it. And I read that in The Alchemist, and it just would not leave me. This is back in the days of Blackberries, right? This was now 11 years ago. I'm looking up what Camino de Santiago is, where it is, what it is, and this was something that would not leave me. I'm like, I need to do that. And, it wasn't a rational thought. It took me 32 days to do the hike, so I would need like 5-6 weeks off of work. I mean, I told you the story earlier. I'd never taken time off of work. Now I'm just going to be willy-nilly and take 6 weeks off. This is in my fantasy. My daughter had gone away to college. She was a freshman, so it was the first time actually that I was like, hey, this actually could happen. I'm like, all right. So now I start playing with my own brain. I'm like, if I find somebody that'll cover my practice for 6 weeks and I feel like they're the right person, I'm going to do this because it means I'm meant to do this. And, it's crazy because everything could fall apart in 6 weeks. You could come back to nothing, but it was just so strong that it wouldn't leave me. And I did find somebody to cover, and I wound up doing the hike. And at that time, I was doing a radio show on public radio. And it was called Your Body is a Wonderland. And the theme song was John Mayer. And, we talked about all this really cool stuff. And it was great. I loved doing it. I'm like, this would be perfect. It would be everything I talk about in the 4 pillars. It'd be physical health. You're walking, you're hiking this 800 kilometers. Your emotional health. I want to do this by myself. And I want to finish it on my 50th birthday. And it's going to kind of be here's how I'm going to start the second half of my life. Intellectually, it was like learning all this stuff I'd have to learn. I'd have to be able to speak my early Spanish from school to do this. And the spiritual pillar, well, it's this 1,200-year-old rich history of spirituality. I'm like, this could be perfect. So I go and I'm doing an intellectual trip, right? Well, none of that ever happened. The radio station didn't get the connectivity we needed, blah, blah, blah. But what happened was the most, I'm searching for a word because I don't know that there is a word. It was such a monumental change in me. It was aha, it was all those things and nothing that I had planned. So, as you explained, you start from southern France and Saint-Jean. You go through the Pyrenees Mountains, which in itself it's a lot, especially when you don't have the guidebook or you don't have walking sticks like everybody else has because you were just going to show up. I promise you, it was like, these people were like, Evelyn, wait a minute, you have a book? I'm like, no, can I read yours today and I'll figure it out tomorrow? I mean, so going through the Pyrenees Mountains was rough. By the 3rd day, I'm like, man, did I really prepare right for this? I was walking 5 times a week, but not in these kind of mountains of the Pyrenees Mountains. Can I even do this? And what happened was I had no phone service because I was going to get all these things when I got over there. Get there, and you learn that stores don't stay open like they do for us here in the U.S. These are little villages. And you go into what the common term is the Camino. You go into the Camino office and the guide is in there, okay, where are you from? Because you have to show for us, a U.S. passport and then a Camino passport because you only get to stay at each lodging place one night and you have to move on. So you have to carry both of these forms of ID. And he says to me, there's only 15 beds at the first stop. You're already late. You better get started. I'm like, oh, man, okay. So I go without any of the things that I find out later that I need. So I started to ask myself, are you crazy? Were you really prepared for this? You know, you just thought you were going to jump in. And anyway, long story short, it was a life-changing experience for me. On day 12 of the trip, let me back up. So I didn't get a phone. I was going to get a SIM card. I didn't get a phone. Last call I made to my daughter was from a public phone booth in St. Jean. I was so connected to my daughter, even though she had gone to college, because it was she and I this whole time, that was going to be the hardest part for me. And she didn't know that I could no longer connect with her. So I had to get going, a lot of stories in between all that, but had to get going, and I did. I start meeting people. What would happen in the Camino is that somebody may walk up to you and say, can I walk with you for a while? And you either say yes or no. And in doing so, they will tell you everything about themselves, more than you want to know. And then at the end, you don't even know their name, and they go off. Everybody's there doing it for a different reason. And I'm starting to hear all these stories. I'm starting to bring it down a bit, because all you do every day is walk, sleep, and eat. So you're really in your head. And I found myself laughing and crying and all of these things along the way, because all of the stuff that I had put in the back of my brain, in the back of my head, started to come out, because you're physically exhausted and you're walking by yourself, and that's all you're doing every day. Day 12, I had met this woman along the way. She was from Holland, and she said, have you gone to any of the pilgrim masses? And she was actually an atheist. And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, you probably should go to one. I said, okay. So that night, I decided everybody was, you'd walk with people and you'd find a bed, and then people would kind of hang out and talk and share stories if they wanted to, or just go to bed and do their own thing, whatever the case may be. And everybody was hanging out, and I just decided I was going to go to this pilgrim mass. And I went in. It's a small, small village, and there's a priest in there, and I sat in the back, and he said, are there any pilgrims in here? And, I kind of raised my hand a little bit, because some people do it for religious reasons. Some people do it for spiritual reasons. Some people do it strictly for the physical aspect of it. And he said, you're going to have 3 meetings along the way. The first meeting is going to be with yourself. And I'm like, oh man, I already did that. I'm laughing and crying all in the same day. Whoa. And then you're going to have meeting with all the other people that you meet on the Camino. And I had met the coolest people. They weren't your average, hey, let's take a vacation in Disney World. They were people that wanted to experience life, and I was meeting really cool people. And then he said, your third meeting is going to be with God. And I'm like, whoa. And guys, I'm still getting goosebumps as I say that now. And it still happens more often than not when I share this. And he said, this is my prayer for you. And I'm like, oh geez, I'm already hearing stuff that like, whoa, this is putting me over the edge. He said, right now, you know exactly who you are. After this, you'll never be the same. And I'm sitting there saying, uh-oh, am I supposed to be doing this? Because I know who I am. And I'm never going to be the same. What do you mean? Well, I came out of this, and I was like, that's why I'm here. That's why this trip that was like so crazy, that made no sense to take 6 weeks and go do it, wouldn't leave me. That's why I was meant to do this. And the radio show didn't happen, and all the other things that were supposed to happen didn't happen. And I have no phone, and I can't talk to my daughter, and all of these things. I'm like, that's why I'm here. So I went back, and everybody's still hanging out outside. Evelyn, how was it? I'm just like, I waved, and I went inside, and I had brought this notebook, and I just started writing. And from that point on, everything changed. And he was right. When I got home, I'll fast forward. When I got home, I couldn't just sit and do the same thing anymore. I started doing the radio show because, back to my daughter, she was going to be going to college. I'm like, man, you need to get a life. Your only life is like, your patients and your work. And what are you going to do when Jackie leaves? I'm like, I want to talk to people about the bigger aspects of health. Health is more than the absence of disease. Like I said earlier, health is this thing that you get to choose how you're going to play it out. It's to realize that life is a gift. How are you going to play it out? It's all of those things. I'm like, I want to talk to people about doing that. That's how the whole radio show thing even started. But it was such a game changer. I was like, I can't do this just talking to one person at a time anymore. I need to get more people to understand this thing every day is a gift. So that's, Shelly, Kurt, I could talk to you guys for hours and days about this, as you can probably tell. But because it was such a different experience. And prior to it, I'll just throw this in, I was talking about it on the radio show, and there was a film company that came to my office and said, we want to film this, and we want to make a movie out of it, and we want to do this, and blah, blah, blah. Write down everything that happens, because we're going to go back and film it. And I came back, and they started pressing me, like showing up in my office unannounced, and just like, we've got to film this. We've got to film this. We've got to film this. I'm like, I'm not ready to share it yet. They're like, no, you're going to forget these things. I said, I'm never going to forget what happened. And it was almost an intrusion of, why do you want this so much? What are you going to do with this? And I decided not to share it with them, because it meant so much more than all that. And I had a couple of publishers already say, we want to do this. I'm like, not yet. Just not yet. It's not ready to be released yet, because it was so personal. It was a life-changing experience. And anybody that I talk to about it is like, oh man, I want to do this now. You made me want to do this. I'll say, it should be on your bucket list. If you ever have the opportunity to do this, I highly recommend it. The film company said, we'll go back and do this again. We're going to make it into a movie. I'm like, the same things will never happen again. But that's life, right? Mm-hmm. Life happens in your heart and in your head. That's life. How do you want to see it? Mm. So that was the Camino, an incredible experience. It changed me in every way.
Well, and it is incredible. I'm just sitting here listening to your story going, there's no words. How do you use words to talk about how that changed you internally in every part of your being, right? There's not words to express it.
Exactly. And in writing the different chapters of it, that was sometimes where I just sit there like, God, how do you put that into words? And that would be the hardest thing to do. Some of these feelings, some of these emotions, how do you put them into words that actually are worthy of the experience?
Mm. Well, so when's your book come out?
So it's done. As soon as I say, okay, let's let this fly.
That'll be exciting. I'm going to be watching for it for sure.
Yep.
I have, I could talk to you, Evelyn, forever and ever, and I might have to, we might have to become best buds so that I can. But I have a question around your experience. You talked about your daughter, and having your daughter in this relationship with, someone that's struggling with addiction, and how that's going to affect her. It's part of her DNA, and, and all of these experiences that you've had with her. What's that journey been like for her, and what have some of her struggles been in your relationship and in life, and how you've been able, these things that you've learned have been able to impact that?
Great question. Well, first I'll say the experiences that I had in my life that I got to impart on my daughter made her kind of fast forward through so much stuff that I had to figure out. Her starting point got to be a little bit different, which, isn't that what we all want as parents, to give our kids more? In her own journey, she was on USA bobsled and had a injury on dry land training to where she had a double rupture of the Achilles. Mm. She had 7 surgeries with the last one being doing a transplant to get the blood supply from her forearm into her Achilles because she was on a wound vac. I mean, this was over several years, these 7 surgeries, because she wouldn't heal. But we got to see up close and personal what pain meds can do and how quickly they can affect us and change us, not for the better. So she went through having to figure that out and get to the other side of it and be, you know, a much better person for it. But it was a struggle. And from, you know, where she was, obviously a huge struggle. Here's this bobsled career that's over, and, you know, here's 7 surgeries. And as mom, who wanted to always make everything better, as you do as a parent, you have to just watch some of this stuff. And that's where the wisdom of life comes in too. I think we just have to sometimes say some of these things need to happen and some of them don't. And you be the parachute for the ones that don't need to go all the way to the end, and let life happen for that person's journey as well.
That's some incredible wisdom that you share there. Is so often we want to save, especially our kids, we want to save them from making errors and having to go through the hard things. But isn't that the whole purpose of life, is to learn from those and to gain that experience and to go through the hard? But it's tough.
Absolutely, it's tough. And, you know, as a parent, you'd rather take the hit yourself. But some of those lessons just have to be learned. That's what life is, right? It's a compilation of a bunch of lessons. And how do we play those lessons out?
Which also, as you kind of share that story, makes more sense about why you've spent so much time with Olympic teams and helping them but I find it interesting that you've done it not just with your daughter, but with the Somalians and with the Ukraine, and you've really been able to get in there and touch a lot of diverse places. Touch on that a little bit, that experience, and why you love that and what you were able to accomplish there.
Both wonderful experiences. My why was because as a kid, I was, you know, don't want to toot my own horn, be humble, but a really good athlete, and I loved playing sports. And for me, my day started at 3 o'clock when the scholastic part of the school day was over, and, you know, the team started. But I loved sports. And to me, the Olympics was just this beautiful experience of the world coming together and realizing we can do this in a peaceful way and compete for a better outcome, right? Faster, higher. It was so incredible, and I grew up loving the Olympics. And, you know, then when I had the opportunity, I'm like, you know what, I would like to try and see if I could work with a team. And I was living in Atlanta at the time, and we got the 96 Olympics. And I said, this is back in the day of faxes. I said, I'm just going to start faxing countries. They're Olympic committees. So here I am faxing countries. And I got back, I met with the Germans, the Irish, the South Africans, Somalis, I think that's it. And being in rural Northwest Georgia, the more affluent countries had better offers. I'm like, guys, you get to come to the country with me. And met with the Somalis, and it was an incredible experience. During the 96 Olympics, they were athletes that didn't really have a country at that time because they were under civil war. So the stories that they would tell me, and it was like I became their everything. You know, I was not just helping them train, I was running with them, I was, you know, their doctor, and, you know, I'm still doing my life and my practice and everything else. And just incredible stories. Like the athlete who ran the marathon was a goat herder in Somalia. He had never had shoes on his feet until 2 weeks before the marathon.
Oh,
so the stories were just incredible, and that whole experience was unreal. I mean, here I am, a kid dreaming about the Olympics, and I get there as a credentialed doctor, and I'm walking in to the opening ceremony, And here's obviously all these African people, and here's this white woman, right? So who is this person? And one of the ACOG volunteers that were on the track, all the nations went into the middle of the track. So they're on the outside of the track, and the stadium is filled with people. Just, the exuberance is incredible. And he comes up to me and he shakes my hand and he said, "Welcome to America." And I said, "Thank you." And he kind of looked at me like, what is this woman doing? And, it was an incredible experience. Still talk to a lot of the athletes to this day. And many of them sought asylum and stayed. And I became the den mother. They were telling me everything, especially when they're under pressure for their event. And now they start just like vomiting all of the things that they did wrong in their lives. It was incredible. It was incredible.
Oh, it sounds incredible. And okay, so you're minimizing just a little bit your gift, right? I think, and I get this a little bit, but this gift of being able to show up and people just know they can trust you because you've been there, you've done your work, you're a living example of, let's figure out how to do this better. Let's figure out how to, overcome some of our challenges. And it makes you safe to talk to. And of course, they're going to bear their lives to you because you're going to help them and they want you to.
Well, thank you. Saying that's, to me, that's like the greatest reward there is, because at the end of the show that we're all part of, what did we do? How did we walk through life? Did we just do it for ourselves? Did we help other people? Did we do a hybrid of both? What did we do? But to me, that's the most important thing. That, not to sound corny, but that when I'm no longer here, something that I've done for somebody else is still going to be a part of the energy that's in this world. That's pretty cool. And everybody has the ability to do that. Yeah. Sometimes we have to get out of our own way.
I agree. And I love this. I mean, we were talking about this manifesting as we were doing some work earlier this week about how do we manifest this and how do we throw out this abundance lifestyle and and you are the epitome of all of that. You decided you wanted to go to the Olympics and you start faxing and look at this experience that you've had as a result. It's incredible. I love how you've manifested and impacted so many people in so many amazing ways.
Well, thank you. I mean, when I talk about the Camino, and I do always, it's kind of sacred to me in a way. And it has to be with people that get it. So I will share what it's all about, not to just fall on deaf ears, but that's the part that's pretty incredible. And when I share that, I said, okay, it sounds a little Forrest Gump-like, okay, so I walked across the country. It does sound a little odd, but when you put it all in its context, it's like, man, this is life every day. How are you going to play it?
Yeah, and in the here and the now, you're surviving, right? You're doing everything you can to survive, and you have to meet yourself. You have to meet every fear, every emotion. Everything is right there in the present, and you can't escape it, right? You can't just go to work and create a relationship with somebody to escape it. So how powerful.
Absolutely.
I can't.
And that. Sorry, Shelley, go ahead.
I can't wait to read the book. I'm just dying for it to come out.
Oh, you're putting the pressure on me now.
No pressure, but I want to know when it comes out because I want to read it right now.
Yeah, that's funny. I was talking to a patient. I don't know, like his appointment was 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "So, Dr. Higgins, can you tell me?" He's like, "This isn't about our visit today, but what are the best books that you've ever read?" And I'm like, "All right, well, have you read this? Have you read this?" And one of them was The Alchemist, and he said no, and I said, "You got to read it." And I started. He's like, "What is it about?" And I told him what I got out of it and where I went with it. And we went on, I'm not kidding, it was my last patient of the day, and it was 8:00 my time. He was a virtual patient on the West Coast. And I said, he's like, can you keep talking? And I said, yeah, you're my last patient. So I went on for probably 45 minutes, but because he was so into it, and he goes, his mouth was just open. He goes, I want to do this now. I'm like, well, if you have the opportunity, I definitely say that you should. I said, figure out how to do it. It didn't make sense for me to do it, but I figured out a way to do it. I said, your life will never be the same. I don't know how it'll change, but I can tell you your life will never be the same. And then he's like, so this is a book? And I said, but it's not out yet. And he goes, no, but I need to read it. I'm like, but it's not out yet. Hang on. This is my soft launch, guys. No, I'm kidding.
You got to wait till I'm ready.
Oh, man. Too funny. But that's good stuff, and just what we just did. We just laughed. I mean, is that the best thing you can do for your body? And again, it goes back to no copay, no deductible, make it happen. But the first thing is our physiology has to be optimized so you can become all of those things. If you're struggling every day, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, I can't. Your wisdom and your experiences are just incredible, and I love the life that you've shared, and that's another piece is that I've struggled with, right? Is being able to share all of those experiences is you've been so good about putting it out there, and sometimes that's a challenge. And so I've learned so much from you just in this brief moments, and I can't wait to grow our relationship and learn more.
Absolutely.
Evelyn, it's just been a thrill having you on, and I appreciate it. And we're going to definitely have to bring you back on when your book comes out and talk more about that. But this has just been a thrill. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure, guys. Really a fun time.